Well, good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is spelled Moretti, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a nonprofit transportation research organization based in Washington, D.C. We're supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations, and they look to us to put out the latest data on the condition, the use, the safety, and the performance of our transportation system. The format today is that after I make my comments, we'll hear from 4 speakers from Kentucky. At the end of our initial comments, we'll open it up for questions. If you use the raised hand function or the chat function, my colleague Carolyn Kelly will then elevate you to the panel so that you can ask questions of whichever speakers you choose. The report today, Kentucky Transportation by the Numbers, is based on an analysis of the latest data from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, the Federal Highway Administration, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The most critical finding in the report is that TRIP estimates that the cost to drivers in Kentucky of driving on rough roads, of lost time and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, and traffic crashes in which the lack of roadway safety features were a contributing factor is $4.7 billion annually. The TRIP report estimates that the average motorist in Louisville is paying an additional $1,884 annually in the cost of operating vehicles on rough roads, the value of lost time and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, and the cost of traffic crashes in which the lack of roadway safety features were a contributing factor. The report finds that the average motorist in the Lexington area is spending an additional $1,513 annually in the cost of driving on rough roads, the cost of lost time and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, and the cost of traffic crashes in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor. The report found that motorists in the northern Kentucky area, TRIP estimates that the average cost to motorists.
I'm sorry, I'm having some internet issues. I'm gonna get off my computer here. I apologize. Sorry about that, Rick.
That's okay. TRIP estimates that the average cost to motorists in the northern Kentucky area of roads that are deteriorated, roads that are congested, or sometimes lacking desirable safety features is $2,154 annually. The TRIP report also looked at the condition of roads and bridges across the state, but we have individual data for 5 of the largest urban areas in the state, including Bowling Green, Lexington, Louisville, Northern Kentucky, and Owensboro. And if you hear some of the data that you would like was not in my initial comments, by all means, in the question session, I can address that. We also took a look at pavement conditions in Kentucky, looking at, now these are both state maintained and locally maintained, so these are all of the major roadways in the state. And we found that 7% of Kentucky's major roadways are rated in poor condition and 21% are in mediocre condition. We also took a look at this regionally. In the Louisville area, the TRIP report found that 19% of major roadways are rated in poor condition and another 25% are rated in mediocre condition. The report found that in the Lexington area, 7% of major roads are rated in poor condition and 13% are rated in mediocre condition. In the northern Kentucky area, the report found that 19% of major roadways are rated in poor condition and 19% are rated in mediocre condition. The report took a look at bridge conditions and found that 7% of Kentucky's bridges are rated in poor condition or structurally deficient and are in need of immediate repair. The report found that in the Lexington area, 4% of the region's bridges are rated structurally deficient. The report found that in the Louisville area, 6% of the region's bridges are rated structurally deficient. And the report found that in the northern Kentucky area, that 6% of the region's bridges are rated structurally deficient. We've been watching travel in Kentucky and across the country as we've gone through the COVID-19 pandemic. The report notes that in Kentucky, in the early stages of the pandemic, vehicle travel dropped by 36%. But by November of 2021, vehicle travel in Kentucky was 4% higher than pre-COVID levels. We did this by comparing it to November of 2019, the most recent pre-COVID November. And really what the data has shown is that not only is traffic back, but it's higher than it was before the pandemic. We took a look at these impacts in terms of traffic congestion, and we found that in the Louisville area, that the average motorist is spending an additional 46 hours annually stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion and wasting an additional 19 gallons of fuel annually. In the Lexington area, TRIP estimates that the average motorist is spending an additional 35 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting 19 gallons of fuel annually due to traffic congestion. For motorists in the Northern Kentucky area, the TRIP report estimates that the average motorist is spending an additional 50 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting an additional 24 hours of fuel annually due to traffic congestion. The report also looked very closely at traffic safety in Kentucky. The report notes, most critically, that Kentucky has the 4th highest traffic fatality rate in the country. And this is obviously a significant challenge. We know that roadway safety improvements, while most of these traffic crashes or serious traffic crashes ultimately are not the result of the condition of the roadway, we do know that when roadway safety features are provided, that we see a significant improvement in traffic safety. This can be such cost-effective strategies such as adding rumble strips, improving lighting, improving intersection design, adding crash barriers. There's a variety of roadway safety improvements that, when implemented, make a significant impact on traffic safety. But the traffic agencies, both at the state and the local level, need to have the resources available to make sure that the best possible roadway safety features appropriate for a portion of roadway are installed to keep people safe. The report found that over the last 5 years in the Louisville area, there have been on average 165 people killed annually in traffic crashes. The report also found that over the last 5 years, there have on average been 68 traffic fatalities annually in the Lexington area. In the Northern Kentucky area, the report found that over the last 5 years, on average, there have been 50 people killed annually in traffic crashes. So that gives you some sense of really the extent and the importance of ensuring that we have as safe a transportation environment as possible. The report also looked at the critical importance of the transportation system to the state's economy. We certainly have seen the importance of the supply chain throughout the pandemic. And the report found that every year, $587 billion worth of goods are moved to or from sites in Kentucky. And this number, in terms of value, is expected to more than double by 2045. We also took a look at the impact of the investment in the transportation system on employment and found that approximately 47,000 jobs in Kentucky are directly attributed to the state's ongoing investment in transportation, and approximately 900,000 jobs in Kentucky in industries like tourism, manufacturing, retail sales, and agriculture are highly dependent on the quality of our transportation system. Last November, at the federal level, we saw the approval of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That is certainly going to be critical, bringing approximately $1 billion a year to Kentucky over the next 5 years and representing about a 35% increase in federal contribution to roads, highways, and bridges in the state. This will be helpful, particularly in light of the significant drop in the state's variable gas tax in 2015, which dropped from 32.5 cents to 26 cents. And since then, it has cost the state approximately $1.2 billion in revenue that could be spent on roads and bridges. And it's going to be critical that this additional federal money, and ideally complemented by additional state and local money, helps Kentucky address its current $900 million annual shortfall in needed highway funding at the state level and $157 million annual shortfall at the local level. The state also has 5 mega projects that are going to cost approximately $3.3 billion to move forward with, including the Brent Spence Bridge, the I-69 corridor, Henderson Bridge project, the Northern Kentucky Outer Loop, the Mountain Parkway expansion, and the completion of US 460 corridors. So Kentucky has significant transportation challenges. The state is coming out of COVID-19 and moving forward, its level of transportation investment is going to be absolutely vital to the health of the state. We're now going to hear from 4 local speakers. I'll introduce them right now, and then we can go through, each of them can make their comments in that order. We're going to hear from Jennifer Kirchner, the Executive Director of the Kentuckians for Better Transportation. We'll hear from John Cox, Director of Public Affairs with the Kentucky Chamber. We'll hear from Shelley Hampton, the Director of Government Affairs with the Kentucky Association of Counties. And then we'll hear from Frank Gemley III, the Executive Director of the Kentucky Association of Manufacturers. Jennifer?
Still have to get used to the unmute function, no matter how many times you do it. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's a really exciting time and critical time for transportation issues that we're facing in Kentucky. I just wanted to take a moment to explain a little bit about what Kentuckians for Better Transportation cares about and why this is so important to us. We believe in a multimodal, equitable, and sustainable transportation network. And by that, that includes structures and funding that are both sustainable, long-term planning, whether it be in the built environment or in policy, with the goal always to enhance quality of life for our economy. And we believe a holistic approach, whether it be to roads, rail, air, we need all of them where we are in our country to make our state really prosper. We know today that Kentucky hasn't done such a great job of keeping pace with our competitor states. And we really see this as an opportunity right now to create some opportunity and to create some conversation about policy and investments that are wise considering these dynamic times. We definitely believe that modernization and innovation, I know they're very overused words, but they're very important. And we see some of this happening already in our tax code modernization, our interest in expanding EVs. The governor just announced some funding last week for that. We also really, I think it's a critical time where we could embrace developments, historic developments like Ford, and really become a leader in the electrification of transportation. So I think there's a lot of work to do, and we have this tremendous opportunity in front of us. And I believe that's what the TRIP data is really telling us. Quite frankly, whatever the numbers may be, Kentuckians are paying thousands of extra dollars every year for insufficient transportation infrastructure. Cost-efficient roads, deferred maintenance, they take a toll, whether it be in safety with pedestrians or vehicular fatalities, or congestion, which, quite frankly, time and money, that's what we care about, and we're falling behind there. So a budget surplus with the IIJA funding will help to compensate for that lost investment that we've suffered over years due to the decline in motor vehicle tax revenue. It'll also add to KYTC's diligent effort to stretch available funding. But as we see with the TRIP data, the reality remains the same. We've made little progress and revenues remain flat. Our geographical location in the U.S. delivers tremendous opportunity to be a logistics nexus, but only if we have deliberate investment. We see that there are obvious synergies and exponential growth between highways and our airports, whether it be commercial with UPS or even our general aviation airports and local communities, and the synergies and the dynamic of growth that could occur. It's a time of electrification of transportation. It's transforming our freight delivery system. We're having discussions about AI, the ever-growing world of e-commerce. 6% of the GDP crosses the Brent Spence Bridge. So addressing those significant corridors, not only for Kentucky, but for our nation is critical. With the opportunities created with these new funds, we think it's a time to keep our foot on the gas and push for funding beyond what our needs are. This is the time to seize an opportunity and become a logistics leader. And then we can also offer an unparalleled quality of life that would really help with business relocation and grow our population, which is something we need to focus on as well. So we can start doing this by addressing our long overdue gas tax issues and lead us to a system that's capable of collecting all user fees from all of those who travel our roads. The modernization also includes establishing a multimodal fund to support rail, water, and public transit. It means realizing the opportunities created in aviation with eVTOLs and the possibilities of commercial and general aviation airports. It means adequately funding safety to reduce roadway and work zone tragedies and recognize active mobility. We have plenty of work to do. I'll end there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, yes, John, excuse me. I was muted, so.
It happens. Thanks, Rocky and Jennifer. And, you know, we look at there's a lot of familiar faces on here because, you know, Jennifer, Shelley, Chad, Frank, we all work together in trying to advance, you know, better transportation investments and opportunities across our state. And, you know, workforce is a key component for us at the Kentucky Chamber as the largest business organization in the state. You know, our goal is to unite business and advance Kentucky. And right now, businesses are united in the need for a skilled workforce, and they're pretty desperate in that need. So we published a report in the fall titled Kentucky's Workforce Crisis, 20 Years in the Making. And, you know, there's a variety of factors that contribute to those workforce shortages. But, you know, it goes on to say that in many parts of Kentucky, especially suburban and rural areas, but at urban core areas too, limited access to transportation and failing roads and bridges can be a serious barrier for job training, interviewing for a job, finding a job, and being able to reliably and consistently show up for work. So that kind of brings us back to the TRIP report. You know, our population in the state is growing, but not quite as fast as most of the states surrounding us. I think the report says from 2000 to 2020, Kentucky's GDP, a measure of our economic output, of course, increased by 21% when adjusted for inflation. And over the same time frame, you know, the U.S. GDP increased about 40%. And so, you know, Rocky talked about all the jobs that the construction of highways and bridges and the design factor. I mean, and 907,000 jobs annually, you know, go into that. I mean, that number might be a little, I think it's pretty much every job in Kentucky is reliant on efficient transportation and safe, reliable transportation. So in order for Kentucky to compete for investments from businesses that are going to bring better paying, you know, more desirable, meaningful jobs that are going to broaden our tax base and bring more people to the state, we must invest in our transportation infrastructure or we're going to get further left behind. And, you know, we have to have well-maintained and efficient roads, highways, bridges to remain economically competitive. And that's what the report says. And we really appreciate TRIP for this great information that helps us, you know, in our efforts to advocate for further investment. And, you know, Jennifer mentioned key things that we have a coalition. It's called the Kentucky Infrastructure Coalition. And we are pretty much lock in step at the Kentucky Chamber with all of these groups in advocating for better funding, multimodal funds. You know, the gas tax is definitely important to us in terms of attracting jobs and investment to our Commonwealth. So we just really appreciate the TRIP report. And, you know, I think that's probably where I'm going to end it for myself, but we appreciate it and look forward to hearing from the others. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I'm going to ask Shelley to unmute and give us her perspective.
Thank you, Rocky, and I appreciate the folks at the TRIP report for the valuable data that they give us. Of course, safe roads move our products and our people in Kentucky and across the nation. They keep us all connected. If you look at this data, the TRIP report shows the fatality rate on rural roads in particular is more than 2.5 times higher than all the other roads in the state, and that has got to be a cause for concern for all of us. It confirms once again that Kentuckians are driving on rough roads that on average cost Kentuckians over $400 a year in additional wear and tear on their vehicles. Adequate transportation funding is critical for Kentucky's counties. We represent all 120 of Kentucky's counties who certainly have a large footprint in the state when it comes to roads. We maintain over half of all the the public road miles in the state and a third of all the bridges across the Commonwealth. So it has never been more critical to invest in our transportation infrastructure. We have been a part of the KIT Coalition since its formation 5 years ago here in Kentucky to bring various stakeholders and a wide variety together to advocate for our past, our current, and our future, whether it's the gas tax or electric and hybrid vehicles. If you use the road, you should help to pay to maintain that. And that is something that we look forward to further discussion on. So thank you all at TRIP for the data that you have shared with us, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. And now we'll hear from Frank.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As we've mentioned this morning, we've all seen over the past 2 years what happens when transportation routes are interrupted by the emergency closure of a major urban bridge that carries 6% of GDP, by an overcrowded commercial port, by a long-running protest at a keynote separating two major trading partners, the US and Canada, or by the global pandemic itself, which continues to produce sparse grocery shelves around the country, including here in Louisville. And as a competitor in a global economy, Kentucky's immune to none of that. The jobs of hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians who work in manufacturing and other businesses, making everything from peanut butter to diamond rings to Chevrolet Corvettes, depend on reliable, safe, modern, robust roads, bridges, and highways. So we thank the Kentucky Association of Highway Contractors, their TRIP colleagues, and their industry partners here in Kentucky for producing this very important assessment. And we urge state, local, and federal policymakers to consider it very carefully and prioritize Kentucky's transportation needs very highly as they make spending decisions this year and beyond. Thank you. Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you, Frank. I'm now going to ask Carolyn to moderate and just give everyone a minute or two on the call. And then if you indicate that you have a question, then we'll welcome you to the panel and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Rocky. As you noted, I'm Carolyn Kelly. I'm the Director of Research and Communication for TRIP. I'll moderate a brief Q&A here so that any of the folks online participating this morning can ask questions that they have of the panelists. I see we've got a couple of hands up already. I'll also note that the full report right now is up on the TRIP website. That's at tripnet, tripnet.org. We'll also have a recording of this news conference posted there, likely in the next half hour or so. So you can also get a recording there as well. I see I've got a question from James Pilcher. James, I'll promote you to a panelist now, and you'll be able to ask your question live of the panelist. All right, James, go ahead. I believe you'll need to unmute yourself.
Good morning. I'm James Pilcher. I'm a reporter with WKRC Local 12 here in Cincinnati in Northern Kentucky. This is a question pretty much for the entire panel. You noted that the dollar amount for overspending or cost to Northern Kentucky motorists was more than $2,100. That's the highest in the state. How much of that is tied up in the Brent Spence, do you think? And then a follow-up question, as you know, the General Assembly is in session right now. What is your message to them as they try to figure out how to pay the state portion of some of these major projects? Are you advocating for a hike in the gas tax? Thank you.
Well, let me just take the first part of that question. TRIP doesn't take positions in terms of state issues or legislation, but in terms of those costs, when you look at Northern Kentucky and you look at the congestion cost in particular, certainly you would anticipate that the challenges with that major river crossing is one of the sources of congestion. So certainly obviously it's a national choke point, and certainly it's impacting northern Kentucky in terms of traffic congestion.
I can take the second part. I think absolutely. I think the message to the legislature is, when it comes time to decide how to direct funds, transportation infrastructure funding is the bottom line to all of the projects that we're discussing, whether it's your children getting to school or Amazon delivering your package and everything in between. Specifically, do we think that there's a gas tax increase? Yes, I think there does need to be. It's part of how antiquated some of our funding has become. But I wouldn't say you just look at the gas tax alone. I mean, we have to look at the competition around us and what's happening. And I think that that's why there needs to be wise and deliberate investment. The gas tax isn't going to capture electric vehicles coming through our state. So we have to solve that problem too. So I think it's a lot of tools in the toolbox that address the modernization of transportation funding.
If I could ask one more follow-up, I've done a couple of stories about this on a national and in a regional basis. The number of traffic fatalities has increased significantly even during the pandemic. The New York Times just did a story on it. I've done a couple of them previously. What do you guys attribute that to, even with the lower amount of driving going on, and what can be done to alleviate that?
Well, certainly, when we talk about roadway safety features, that's something that is a long-term challenge. So when you look at less travel and greater fatalities, certainly, although TRIP hasn't done the comprehensive research, but we've seen some of the material that I think you're discussing. The implication does tend, it comes down to ultimately the driver of the vehicles, whether it's speed or impairment or any of those issues. Moving forward, the challenge obviously is how these numbers are astronomically too high, and to say that you're fourth highest and well beyond the national average, well, the national average is unacceptable. So really, it's going to take all components of that: enforcement, obviously, education to make sure that you have safe drivers and they're staying at safe speeds and driving appropriately and they're not impaired. And the third part is engineering. When you see the traffic fatality rates on rural roads in Kentucky, one of the highest in the country, certainly those roadways, if you're adding the features to make them safer, shoulders, clear zones, the lack of pavement drop-offs, all those things are contributing. But really, you need the whole holistic approach to improving safety.
I would just add one more thing quickly, in that there's a real issue with pedestrian fatalities too. And I think that you see that also in a lack of modernization. We really need to address the interfaces of, whether it be complete streets or scooters, coming to urban areas and becoming another mode of transportation. I think we have to take all of that into consideration when we're talking about safety.
Well, and certainly the report points out that 11% of traffic fatalities in Kentucky are bicyclists or pedestrians. So certainly that echoes Jennifer's message.
Okay, thanks, James, for your question. And I see we've got another question from Ricky Sayer. Ricky, I've promoted you to a panelist, so if you unmute your mic, you'll also be able to ask your question live.
Great, thank you so much. We're in Lexington. Question from us would be, first of all, when we talk about those fatality numbers, comparatively, why do you believe it is so much higher here in Kentucky compared to the rest of the country? And can you help us make the connection between bad roads and those $1,500 that people in our area would be spending to get that resolved because of those bad roads?
Sure. Let's sort of address the safety challenge. It was outside the scope of the report to dig into the data to try and find out why Kentucky is so much higher than other states, obviously being the fourth highest. When you see that high traffic fatality rate at the rural area, obviously that suggests that is part of the challenge. And as the previous question alluded to, we actually, although we haven't seen the state by state data, we saw traffic congestion or traffic fatalities going up. So certainly you've got to look at all the areas from driver decisions and behavior, but certainly you also have to look at the engineering side of it, and certainly Kentucky with part of it is the topography of the state is obviously challenging from a safety perspective, but that notwithstanding, again, the real challenge is to make sure that transportation agencies at the state and local level can systematically look at their system and start to identify the types of systematic improvements that are going to improve safety. And we've seen when states have the resources to do that you see fatality and serious crashes coming down. So that certainly needs to be part of it. Now to break down the numbers a little bit, in the Lexington area, we estimate that it's an additional $1,513 per year, but there's three components of that. The first are pavement conditions, an additional $306. That is based on analysis that shows that the rougher that roads are on, the harder vehicles have to work to drive on those rougher surfaces, so they're less efficient, they're using more fuel, they need more routine maintenance, and then most significantly, it accelerates depreciation. As you would anticipate, the more a car's getting jarred and knocked around, that's going to take some time off its lifespan. So it's really just taking those numbers over, of course, several years. And if you're in the showroom a year earlier than you planned, obviously that's a significant cost. The congestion number in Lexington of just over $800 is a function of what's the value of that additional time. It's basically about a 1 working week per average commuter in the Lexington area. The reality is, I suspect most people probably value their time at a higher level. I think the number is $20 an hour for this study that we rely on, but I think people probably think their time's worth even more than that. And then the third component, the safety component, again, that is just looking at the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes. But I mean, most of us have probably been impacted, unfortunately, in our life by the results of a serious traffic crash, and we all know that the economic costs are the least of our worries. But the real cost of traffic crashes can't really be computed. So this is just taking a look at the economic loss due to traffic crashes, lost productivity, lost time, hospitalization, and then dividing it by the number of drivers. Really just to monetize an issue that obviously transcends fiscal considerations, but just so people can understand that when you don't have a system that's as safe as it ideally could be, we're all paying a price.
Got it. Thank you so much. Something quick for the other panelists on here. Does anything in this support surprise you, particularly something that you can take to lawmakers?
I'll speak to that just real quickly. This is Chad LaRue with the Kentucky Association of Highway Contractors. What I would tell you is there's not any, I'll call it Easter egg or nugget that's like an oh wow moment. But what I would tell you is this is the third report that TRIP has done in Kentucky since 2017. They did one late, I think it was late 17, early 2020, and then this one. And what you see is even with a little bit of growth in money, even with the cabinet doing a really diligent job of trying to stretch their dollars out and really try to impact the program as best they can, we've seen no progress made in Kentucky since 2017. These numbers have trended about flat or even deteriorated just slightly. And so for me personally, going to legislators, it's a report card to say, we're still not making the grade we want to make. And the way to move that needle or to increase that grade is that there's going to have to be some modernization of the funding mechanisms, as well as a net increase in the funding available to the state level, the counties and the cities to address their transportation needs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the whole report is a punch in and of itself that demonstrates how well we've done really with how little has gone so far. And in some ways that's worked against us. We've maybe been a little too good. I'll tell you in terms of safety and working with the cabinet, they are so diligent and so concerned about safety. And, I think there's a direct correlation to resources that are available. So if we want to prioritize safety, like everyone agrees that we want to, then I would let the legislature know that they have to put the funds in the budget, whether it be an increased gas tax or a general appropriation, allocation. I would also say that it needs to be sustainable. One-time funding isn't going to get us to a prosperous future. The Brent Spence demonstrates this in spades that, if we don't have the funds to keep up with such infrastructure, there's pretty significant consequences. So I think it's about planning and recognizing that there's a lot of good people who have been doing a lot of hard work with very little, and we've got to fix that. And now's the time to do that.
Yeah, and Ricky, I would offer that the takeaway from the report is not a surprise, but it is that our transportation system remains a major challenge to our economic competitiveness and our quality of life. That's not a surprise, but this reiterates that. And our policymakers are sensitive to that, but we'll be urging them to take an even harder look as a result of these numbers.
Well, thank you. Carolyn, are there any additional questions?
I don't see any further questions that have come in.
Okay, well, we want to thank the panelists for taking time out, and then thank each of you that took the time to call in and take an interest. With that concludes our news conference today. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
great day.